virgin coconut oil also has a lot of different polyphenols. There are also many of them in like extra virgin olive oil contains polyphenols, and these are like antioxidants and anti-inflammatory substances. So, eating virgin coconut oil, and I mean, there's vitamins and minerals in it too, as well as these fatty acids that, can increase ketones. It's a very interesting oil. It's completely different from animal fat. They always say coconut oil is high in saturated fat. Well, most of that saturated fat are these medium chain triglycerides that you either convert to ketones or they're used immediately as energy. They're not stored as fat. So it's kind of a misnomer that it's, when they say it's high in saturated fat, you should avoid it. It's not the same as like animal fat. What is in it. It's much more like the long chain, what are called the long chain fatty acids, are the saturated fats that are, basically an animal fat.
Namaste, beautiful souls. I'm Shilpa, and you're tuned into the Omni Mindfulness Podcast, a sanctuary for spiritual entrepreneurs. As a holistic mindfulness coach and social marketing strategist, I'm here to guide you on a transformative journey. On this show, we explore captivating stories and provide practical tools that deepen your connection with your authentic self. Through the personal and professional narratives of remarkable individuals, we expand our consciousness and ignite the spark of possibility. Each season, I curate content that empowers you to create a holistic lifestyle encompassing spirituality, mindfulness, energy awareness, and mindset. Join me as we engage in conversations with experts in their respective fields and share solo casts from yours truly, all aimed at supporting you and relaxing, revitalizing, resetting your body, mind, and spirit. I'm your host and the visionary behind Omni Mindfulness. So what if just one story had the power to shift the trajectory of your life? What if you could become an instrument in helping others realize their true selves? And what if your soul's higher purpose lies in experiencing the joy of Omni Mindfulness? Remember, it's never too late to rewrite your story. Welcome to Season 8 of the Omni Mindfulness Podcast. During this exciting season, we delve deep into the power of mindset. In October, join us as we explore Happy Mind. Is happiness an inside-out job? We'll explore the concept of happiness from various perspectives, ranging from DNA and brain health to mindfulness practices. Moving into November, it's all about conscious connections. Loneliness can be an epidemic, especially during the holidays. Let's understand the art of forming meaningful connections. And in December, we wrap up 2023 with the theme Embodied Awareness. Discover how to connect your body, mind, and spirit for a holistic approach to life. Stay tuned for thought-provoking conversations, expert insights, and transformative stories. It's a season you won't want to miss. And up next is my returning guest, Dr. Mary Newport, to discuss the third edition of her book, Alzheimer's Disease, What If There Is a Cure? The Story of Ketones. Dr. Mary Newport was born and raised in Cincinnati, Ohio, and graduated from Xavier University in Humanities and Pre-Medicine and the University of Cincinnati College of Medicine. She trained in pediatrics at the Children's Hospital Medical Center in Cincinnati, Ohio, and in neonatology at the Medical University Hospital in Charleston, South Carolina. And she is board certified in pediatrics and neonatology, the care of sick and premature newborns. She practiced neonatology for 30 years and was founding medical director for 2 newborn intensive care units in Tampa Bay area of Florida. More recently, she practiced at the opposite end of the spectrum, providing hospice care and more recently, health risk assessments. In 2008, she implemented a ketogenic nutritional intervention with coconut and medium chain triglyceride oil that dramatically helped her husband, Steve Newport, who had early onset Alzheimer's disease. In 2010, she guided her husband through the first pilot study of the beta-hydroxybutyrate butanoyl ketone ester in a person with Alzheimer's and co-authored a case report published in the Alzheimer's and Dementia in 2015 with Dr. Richard Visch and others. Her husband lost his battle with Alzheimer's and Lewy body dementia in 2016, and Dr. Newport carries on his legacy as an author of 3 books and international speaker on ketones as an alternative fuel for the brain. Dr. Newport is a certified ketogenic nutrition specialist through the American Society of Nutrition. Her 4th book, which became available in November of 2022, Clearly Keto for Healthy Brain Aging and Alzheimer's Prevention, focuses on whole food ketogenic Mediterranean style diet, ketogenic strategies, and other lifestyle modifications to help prevent or slow down progression of Alzheimer's and other neurological conditions. And now, here's Dr. Mary Newport. Welcome, Dr. Mary Newport. I am so happy to have you back.
Thank you, Shopa. I'm so excited to be here.
There is such wisdom and so much knowledge that you have brought in your new book, or the re-edition, correct?
3rd edition, yes.
Wow.
Yeah, the 1st edition was in 2011 and the 2nd in 2013. So there's 10 years in between.
Well, I've enjoyed going through it. And today's topic is very timely, I believe. Around the holidays, people do tend to sometimes feel a little bit blue. And this month, the theme is called Happy Mind, which is controversial because some people think, well, it's a state of mind and you just need to do some mantras or prayers and you get there. And before I hit record, I said, perhaps it's also about what we feed our body.
Yes. I totally agree with that. I think it probably has everything to do with it for many people out there.
Yeah. And you were sharing something about, you had just made a suggestion about a YouTube site I would love to look into, Metabolic Mind, and a conference you had recently been to. Maybe you can elaborate.
Yeah. So last week, I actually had 3 poster presentations at this conference, but it's called the 8th Global Symposium on Ketogenic Therapies for Epilepsy and Other Neurological Disorders. So they look at not just epilepsy, but Alzheimer's, which is what I have been most interested in, Parkinson's, but even for cancer, ketogenic therapy, ketogenic diet support for treatment for cancers and that type of thing. But there was a group there, they've become very, there's greatly increasing awareness about the possibility that ketogenic diets can treat people with psychiatric illnesses. And these include bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, even schizophrenia. People with schizophrenia have responded very positively to a ketogenic diet, and many of them are doing so well that they're able to function again in society, get jobs, basically happier, happier mind, and get off much of their medications, if not all of their medications, with the ketogenic diet. So nutrition plays a very prominent role. If nutrition, I always feel like, and this happens like with type 2 diabetes too, if a diet like a ketogenic diet can reverse the symptoms and make you better such that you can get off medication, there's a good chance that diet has something to do with causing that in the first place. So, so many people are on a very, very high sugar diet, very low fat. I mean, we've been told that for decades, 50 something years, that we should eat a low fat diet, but that it translates into a high carb diet. But anyway, so at this conference, there is a group led basically the Basuki Foundation. It's let's see, BASZUCKI Foundation, and the son of this family had a really severe problem with depression, other psychiatric problems, and he responded incredibly well to a ketogenic diet. So the family developed this foundation to support research into this. And the research is actually making good progress. And there were other people there, who they themselves had experienced that too, who were in panel discussions and talked about how their life completely turned around, after they started doing a ketogenic diet. So it's just a very interesting new area of research, and it relates to me. I mean, I could really relate to it because Alzheimer's disease, my husband had early onset Alzheimer's. We talked about that in the previous podcast. But my husband's earliest symptom was depression. He became severely depressed. He was having memory problems, and his doctors felt like the memory problems were related to his depression. Well, it turned out he had Alzheimer's, and knew he was losing functional ability, and that's why he was depressed. But that was one of the earliest symptoms. And it's very common for people with Alzheimer's to have a lifelong history of depression, or to develop depression, in the course of the disease, as well as anxiety, all kinds of behavior issues, even psychosis, hallucinations, things that are associated with psychiatric illnesses. So, there was a lot of discussion, that like years ago, the fields of neurology and psychiatry were separated from each other. But really, many people with neurological conditions also have psychiatric symptoms, and vice versa, so really they kind of work together, and probably should work together. But anyway, the evidence now is mounting that nutrition likely does have something to do with it. And I mean, and this has been a growing problem. I mean, so many more people these days that report depression and anxiety than they did maybe 40 or 50 years ago. And our diet changed drastically, really over the last 100 years, but especially during the last 50 or 60 years, even more so. So it's a really interesting trend now that's going on, and it'll be exciting to see how this research unfolds. And hope we'll hear more and more about people that have responded to this.
I recall from your book and our previous conversation that while in, I would say, maybe modern society, we lost some essence of how our body needs to be fully nourished with foods. And I recall in Kerala, I believe, or somewhere in India, there is a region where the density of coconut in the diet has affected them. Maybe you recall that.
Yeah, that particular area of India is loaded with coconut trees. It's tropical. It's loaded with coconut. People use coconut morning, noon, and night in their cooking, and they have very low rates of Alzheimer's disease in that particular area. There happened to be several doctors, one physician, and a couple of PhD researchers that I got to meet and talk to quite a lot at this conference, and they were from that area. And the doctor, he won an award. He actually won an award for his patient care, that he's been doing in India. He is a neurologist, and he helps all kinds of people, Alzheimer's, all different types of neurological disorders, with coconut MCT, low carb diet, and he several supplements, things like DHA, omega-3, that type of thing, to help support brain health. And he's had very good success. He was there, and we were talking. We just had a wonderful conversation, and then there were others who weren't really familiar with all of that were listening, and it was really great. I did have 3 poster presentations there, and I got to present a collection of 288 cases. These were like emails that people had sent to me, almost all emails, mostly caregivers, sometimes the person themselves, where that person had Alzheimer's, some other type of dementia, or some other kind of memory impairment. And I had collected them over about 6 years, from 2008 to 2014. And they were people who had started taking coconut oil. All of them had started taking coconut oil, and about a quarter of them also added MCT oil down the road. But they, 90% of them had reported some kind of improvement. And I tried to categorize the types of improvements and that people reported. And some people had multiple areas, like about 2/3 of them said they had some kind of memory or cognitive improvement, but, and that's what's usually measured, when they test drugs. They usually measure memory and cognition, but there's so many other components to Alzheimer's disease. There can be physical symptoms like tremors, trouble walking. My husband had that improved, mood and behavior, depression, anxiety, there was a category of that. And at least a third of the people reported some kind of improvement in that area. And then speech and language, being able to finish sentences, being able to engage in conversations that make sense again, that type of thing. That was another category. And that was, about a little over a third of the people reported something there. Resuming activities, self-care, being able to do things like take a shower and shave, that type of thing, people reported being able to do again, or they resumed a hobby, or were able to, like my husband, he was able to do some work around the house and some yard work again, cutting the grass with a big lawn tractor. He used to take it apart, and then he started actually not taking it apart and mowing the lawn again with it. So, I got to present that, and there was a lot of interest in that. Then just I had another poster. It was what I call a personalized plan for mild to moderate nutritional ketosis, for people with Alzheimer's and other memory impairments. And, there's a set of things that you can do. And, for me and my husband, it started with adding coconut and MCT oil to our diet. We had already started using a Mediterranean diet about 2 years before that, and he continued to progress. I don't know if it slowed it down. I got a lot of benefits from it. I've stayed on it ever since, and he did too for the rest of his life. But, changing from a convenience food, high carb, low fat, ultra processed diet, basically, to a healthy, whole food Mediterranean diet, it greatly reduced how much carbohydrate just right off the bat that we were getting. We started adding more olive oil and fish oil, things like that, eating a lot more fish to our diet. This was in 2006. And then in 2008, that's when we added first the coconut oil and then MCT, and saw a really marked improvement in my husband that continued over 9 or 10 months. So, but then, since after that, I learned about other things like the ketogenic diet for epilepsy. I was familiar with it from my medical training, but it wasn't used very much, except at Johns Hopkins Hospital. They kind of kept it going for like 100 years. This is something that's over 100 years old, that putting a child with seizures who doesn't respond to drugs on a ketogenic diet, about a quarter of them will completely stop having seizures. And about another 50% will have a huge reduction in the number of seizures that they have. And now they know that adults respond this way too. So an adult with epilepsy who's not doing well with drugs, still having seizures in spite of being sometimes on 4 or 5 different drugs, lethargic, you can imagine all the side effects you would have from that. They'll respond to a ketogenic diet, many of them, and they get their life back, when that happens. So, that has become an important component of what I encourage people to do. Eat a healthy whole food diet, reduce the carbohydrate, the obvious sugary drinks, get rid or minimize it as much as possible. Some people just can't completely give it up. Maybe you can have a bite or two instead of a big piece of pie or something, and then, other things like exercise. Like walking for 30 minutes will increase your ketone levels. Ketones are an alternative fuel for the brain. And as we age, our brains kind of, there's a gap in how much energy our brain gets versus what it needs. And that worsens as you get older, and it's much, much worse in Alzheimer's. And this is a problem with getting glucose. It has to do with insulin resistance. Insulin gets glucose into cells. Glucose is a fuel, but when there's insulin resistance, there's difficulty getting glucose into cells, and that includes brain cells. It can affect other organs as well. It's like type 2 diabetes, basically. But ketones are an alternative fuel for brain cells and basically almost all other organs. And so, they don't need insulin to get into cells. So insulin resistance, it just bypasses that problem. If you can get into ketosis, increase ketones in your blood. The coconut and MCT oil do that. Exercise does that. Overnight fasting for at least 12 hours will increase ketones in your blood. So there are quite a few things people can do. And then adding the oils, like some at each meal could help sustain a mild level of ketosis all the time. So, I presented that. And there were so many dietitians there. There are from all around the world. There were people from all around the world, doctors, researchers, many dietitians who help their patients with ketogenic diets for epilepsy and other problems. And so there was a lot of interest in that poster too. I kind of surprised. I don't know. I don't know why I should be surprised, but it was. A lot of people stopped to talk to me about that, and there are exogenous ketone supplements too now, ketone salts, ketone esters that can bump the ketone level up quite a bit higher. And when people have a neurological condition such as Alzheimer's, I suggest they're available on the open market, that they maybe take something like that a couple times a day to boost their ketone levels up. And so that's kind of a plan. People can pick and choose. If you absolutely can't exercise, some people they're chair bound. They really can't do something that would stimulate their ketones. There may be other things like overnight fasting, reducing the carbohydrate in their diet, things like that, adding the oils, coconut or MCT oil, that could help increase their ketone levels.
Ever since you and I last spoke about recipes, diets,
Yeah.
I got really creative with my way of making salads. And I love salads. I'm mostly vegetarian, slightly pescatarian at times.
Mm-hmm.
And the other week, I had this plant-based meat, so to speak, with this hearty salad, and I just drizzled the coconut oil on top.
Mm-hmm.
And it tasted good, and I'm sure I got some benefits, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 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 Coconut oil. There's more to it. Well, it contains medium chain triglycerides, and they extract that to make what's called MCT oil, or medium chain triglyceride oil. But virgin coconut oil is loaded with other things that can be very beneficial. Half of the oil is a fatty acid called lauric acid, and there's just a little bit of it in most of the MCT oils. There's some that are higher in it, but most of them just have a little bit of lauric acid. But lauric acid is highly antimicrobial. It kills all kinds of viruses, bacteria, fungus, protozoa. It kills the pathogens in the mouth that cause tooth decay. And those are also associated with Alzheimer's disease. People that have poor dental repair, that have a lot of cavities, they have these bacteria, spirochetes, other things in their mouth. Lauric acid actually kills that. So there's a practice. It really comes from India, Ayurvedic medicine, called oil pulling, that's been around for at least 4,000 years, where people put oil in their mouth, in this case, coconut oil, and you kind of swish it around in your mouth for like 10 or 20 minutes, and it kills all kinds of organisms that are in the mouth that are bad, and somehow it supports healthy bacteria. I don't know. Healthy bacteria apparently like coconut oil and lauric acid, but it will kill pathogenic, damaging bacteria and organisms. It kills, it actually, there was some work in Singapore and in the Philippines, showing that lauric acid even kills the coronavirus. So they were, it dissolves the lipid capsule around the virus, and it inactivates the virus that way. And herpes, the whole herpes family, including the shingles virus and herpes simplex. A lot of people have fever blisters on their mouth. And cytomegalovirus is another herpes virus that it inactivates those viruses by dissolving the lipid capsule. So there's a lot of research with Alzheimer's, hundreds of studies of herpes viruses, dental pathogens, Lyme disease, which is a spirochete, in the same family with syphilis, which is known to cause dementia, that lauric acid kills. And these have been associated with Alzheimer's disease, connected to thought to be either causing the disease or contributing to it in some way.
So in addition to coconut oil, an approach that one could take for their diet, to take a lauric acid supplement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's actually one, I've been taking it through the whole pandemic. It's called monolaurin. It's just a little tiny monolaurin. So lauric acid, like in oils like coconut oil, the fatty acids are connected together into triglycerides and diglycerides and monoglycerides. And in a monoglyceride, there's just one of the lauric acid fatty acids. So monolaurin is the most active form of lauric acid as far as, killing bacteria and viruses and all of this. And there's a product that's just called monolaurin, monolaurin. And it's like little white pellets. You just take a little scoop and you don't even have to chew them. You just swallow them, with some water. And, that will, put a level of monolaurin into your blood, that will help protect against infections and that type of thing. And so it's been out for quite a long time. And it's not very expensive either, so, that's another interesting approach if you want to get that particular effect of coconut oil. And then another, virgin coconut oil also has a lot of different polyphenols. There are also many of them in like extra virgin olive oil, contains polyphenols. And these are like antioxidants and anti-inflammatory substances. So, eating virgin coconut oil, and I mean, there's vitamins and minerals in it too, as well as these fatty acids that, can increase ketones. So it's a very interesting oil. It's completely different from animal fat. They always say coconut oil is high in saturated fat. Well, most of that saturated fat are these medium chain triglycerides that you either convert to ketones or they're used immediately as energy. They're not stored as fat. So it's kind of a misnomer that it's, when they say it's high in saturated fat, you should avoid it. It's not the same as like animal fat, what is in it. It's much more like the long chain, what are called the long chain fatty acids are the saturated fats that are, basically in animal fats. And I don't even really have a problem with animal fat, myself. But it's just a misnomer that, coconut oil is like animal fat in any way. It's completely different, the structure of it, the types of fatty acids that are in it, and the other things like polyphenols that are in it. It's just not like animal fat at all. And it's really not like other vegetable oils either. There's a little bit of overlap of the type of fatty acids that are in it, but most of them are completely unique to coconut oil.
And that has been a concern on again, off again. I hear from different people when I mention that I've upped my coconut oil and coconut oil.
Yeah.
I'm doing exactly what we talked about in our last podcast. And I started to wonder, do I need to take something to reduce cholesterol proactively if I am upping my coconut oil? Or is there a supplement I should be doing to balance anything?
Yeah. So that's also kind of a misnomer, but I've been reviewing, I've spent really the last year, I'm working on a new project that's going to be another book. It's really not related to Alzheimer's or even ketones, but it's related to coconut oil and saturated fat. And where did the idea come from that we should eat a low-fat diet? Where did this idea come from? Was it ever justified? What I'm finding, it probably never was justified. And this whole obsession with saturated fat, almost all of the studies that looked at the effects of saturated fat on cholesterol levels used, many of them used hydrogenated fats, but they would call solid fats. They included heavily hydrogenated fats to include solid fats like Crisco, shortening, and that margarines were loaded, and these were loaded with trans fats, so when they decided what was considered saturated fat, it would be shortenings, margarines, and then they would do coconut oil because at like 74 degrees, it's kind of a semi-solid. It's a creamy white, and they put butter in there and lard and beef tallow, animal fats, other animal fats. But they were looking at during a time in the US when shortening, which was heavily hydrogenated fat with trans fat, was found in at least 50% of households in the US. So when they were studying these people, they were kind of grouping together these trans fats with natural fats. They didn't distinguish them, and they came to the conclusion that they increase your cholesterol. But the other thing they never proved, I've looked at study after study after study, they never proved that even if it raised your cholesterol, that it increased your risk of dying from heart disease. They never proved that. They still don't. They still, they say it increases your risk for heart disease by increasing your cholesterol level, but they can't say that it has a greater risk of causing you to die from heart disease, because they have never been able to prove that. So what I did, there's been a whole series of coconut oil studies. Basically, they use coconut oil to represent saturated fat in these studies, and then they usually put it up against other oils that are like olive oil or polyunsaturated fat oils like soybean oil, sunflower oil, safflower oil, those kind of things. And they would compare what the effect on cholesterol is, and polyunsaturated fatty acids, they do tend to decrease your cholesterol level. But the LDL cholesterol, which is sometimes called bad cholesterol, it lowers that, but it also lowers the polyunsaturated fats, also lower HDL cholesterol, which is the good cholesterol. You want that to be higher, not lower, so they tend to do that. But they also, so they would compare the difference between the two oils. But what I did, I basically took all the data, from these 16 studies, that had been done from about 1985 to around 2018 was the last one, and looked at what was the baseline cholesterol level for the people who were in the coconut group, and what was their final level after they took coconut for a period of time. And, what I found is that the studies were all over the place. There were studies that maybe they might have had 10 people. Some of them had 9 or 10 people, not very many people. They studied them for a few weeks. And in some cases, the cholesterol level went down on average. In some cases, it went up, and in others, it stayed the same, in these studies. And when I combined all of them together from all of these people, it averaged out that it was like less than a 1% difference in the cholesterol levels when you averaged all these 500 and something people together that were in these 16 studies, But when you look at the individual, it looks like anything can happen if you start taking coconut oil. And this was also true. I looked at the other oils separately too. This was true for the other oils. Even some of the studies with soybean oil showed that some people had an increase in their cholesterol level when they took soybean oil, which is supposed to lower your cholesterol, so they're really all over the place, and you can't really say what's going to happen to an individual. It could go in any direction or not change at all. Basically that's the bottom line. So it's a really complicated question. If somebody says, will it raise my cholesterol? It's like, well, it could, but on the other hand, it might not. It might even lower your cholesterol. It's just depends on the person. And also it looks like it might be a temporary thing too, because a lot of these studies, most of them were very short. They were 6 weeks or less. And, if you add anything new to your diet, you're going to have some changes in your metabolism, over a period of time. And then, it may, basically kind of return back to where your baseline was. Sorry, I have to take a sip of water.
Yes, I believe that having a holistic approach in the end is probably one of the ways to manage this, is that if you remain active, you're doing other things that are enhancing your nutrition, as well as just even going back to what we were talking about earlier, meditation, mindset. So the nutrition adds or supplements what other things you can be doing. But that has been a question, and I think a lot of people get concerned. I'm glad.
I get asked that all the time about cholesterol. And so, I just felt like I needed to look at these studies to see, what the real data was showing. And it shows it could go in any direction, basically. So
Your new book will also talk about maybe enhancing your diet with the coconut oils as well.
Right. So, so this third edition of my book, The first part of it is my husband's story. And I was really grateful to the publisher to get to do a third edition because his story was far from done in 2013, when this book came out. Books tend to be completely finished a year and a half before they're actually published, so he lived 4 more years, after that last book was published, and a lot of things happened in between. And I used my book, like his story, complete story from, beginning to end is in here. But I like to use it to help caregivers. Caregivers aren't really told what's going to happen when they have a loved one, their spouse or a parent, that has Alzheimer's disease. There's nobody that sits you down and tells you this is how this is going to unfold, over the next, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. And this is how it's going to end up if they die with Alzheimer's disease, die because of Alzheimer's disease. Many people, they die of something else before they actually die from Alzheimer's disease, if that makes any sense. They'll develop dementia. Most people are quite elderly, when they develop it. And they might have confusion and other symptoms of Alzheimer's the last 2 or 3 years of their life. But many people will die of something else, but when you die of Alzheimer's to the bitter end, the person eventually becomes completely dependent, like a newborn. Again, every single thing needs to be done for them. And a lot of people don't realize that, and, in the end, they basically stop eating and drinking. They can't remember how to swallow and chew. I mean, it's just a most horrible thing, to have to go through. And nobody really prepares you for that. When the neurologist tells you, it looks like you have Alzheimer's disease, a lot of them will say, get your affairs in order and just go on, try to go on with your life as best you can. And, but they don't, I think few people actually get a rundown of what's going to happen, and that's, in a way, I mean, it's sad for the victim to know that, to have to know that, but the caregivers need to know that. They need to be prepared. Like you hear of people, like in Florida, we have these silver alerts, where a person with dementia, usually they disappear in their car, they take off with their car and they're lost and their family can't find them, so we'll have a silver alert that has the description of the car and their license tag number, that they put on the expressways. They have, like signs, that will flash this. And but you don't know when that's going to happen. You need to know that it could happen. People need to know that this can happen, or they can walk out the door and wander away from home for the first time. They might go out for a walk every day, and then one day they don't come home, and they're lost somewhere. And I did hospice for about 3 years. My husband was in hospice, and I just loved so much what they did that I ended up going from doing Newport intensive care to doing hospice, which was a completely opposite thing, but I had patients that had happened to. They, like one lady walked out the back of her house. Her family had cameras in their house. They lived next door, but they were letting her still live alone. She wandered out the back of her house and she was in the woods for 14 hours before they realized that she was missing. It happened, in the late evening, and, they all went to bed. And then the next day, where's grandma, and she was in the woods. And it's just tragic, what can happen. And you have to know that can happen and kind of take steps ahead of time. But, other things like that, happen with all, just unexpected things that you just would not. They say truth is stranger than fiction, and it is in this case. So I try to provide as much information for caregivers as I can. I have, when my husband did go into hospice, there's a section all about hospice. And, most people, many people with Alzheimer's qualify much earlier than they get into hospice. They can qualify for it to get all the help, which is great for caregivers, to have an aide come into your house to help with bathing and changing a bed and, things like that, and all kinds of supplies that you get through Medicare, if they're in hospice care that normally you would have to pay for. And, so I talk about that, so that section is all about, basically my husband's journey through Alzheimer's. And he did pass away from it, even though he improved dramatically and maintained that for almost 4 years. Eventually, basically he started having seizures. And the first time he had one, he was standing and he fell back and hit his head. And he was unconscious for quite a while, more than 12 hours or so. And he just didn't recover. He was completely dependent after that, but he still managed to hang on for another 2.5 years.
Well, for those who would have the opportunity to listen to the first podcast and even read the book, it's remarkable that you were so engaged and proactively looking at the data when the early signs were there for him, and you extended his life and maybe even the quality based on the diet and nutrition.
Yeah, his quality of life improved dramatically, really. And it was we started with coconut and MCT oil. He was already on a healthy Mediterranean diet, and then, just upped it, slowly, very slowly increased how much he was getting. And we saw really remarkable thing. I mean, just something like after 2 months, he could tie his shoes again, I mean, that's just a simple thing that people can relate to, I think. But early on, he was trying out for a clinical trial. He 2 days in a row for 2 different drugs, and his score improved. This is the very first day he took coconut oil. His score improved from the day before so much that he was able to qualify for a study, and it was like, well, was this real, or did we just get lucky? But, kept it going and started incorporating it into every meal. And he just steadily improved. He had tremors that went away very quickly. He had a weird stiff gait. He couldn't pick up his feet and run. And by 2 months, he was walking completely normally again and could run again and tie his shoes. That's when he started, being able to do that. And then around 3.5 months, he started reading again after not reading for 1.5 years. And then he described that he had this visual disturbance. He said the words were moving around on the page. That's why he couldn't read. And that stopped after about 3.5 months. And then he continued to improve in around 9 or 10 months. He could remember what he had read earlier in the day and tell me details about it. And that was the point at which he desperately wanted to do something useful. And so he became a volunteer at the hospital where I worked, and worked in the supply warehouse. And, before we started this, he could barely finish a sentence. He couldn't stay on task, remember what he was doing. He would take things apart instead of like we mentioned, mowing the lawn. He would take the lawn tractor apart, but now he was actually using it to mow the grass again. It was really remarkable, and greatly improved his quality of life, for almost 4 years before, we had that big setback. And then he did die from Alzheimer's disease. His cholesterol levels, by the way, were wonderful. And his HDL cholesterol had been below normal, and it went to double that, and it was well above normal. Triglyceride levels were never over 70, and like 150 is the upper level that's considered normal. So he was half that. His LDL cholesterol, right in the very beginning, he was on statins, and about a year later took them off. And so when you do that, your cholesterol level will go back up. So it went back up, but then it came back down, and it was normal the last few years, completely normal, under 200 total cholesterol. LDLs were, under 100, and his HDL was around 60 or 70. Triglycerides were around 70. He had perfect lipids, and he was taking somewhere around 10 or 11 tablespoons of coconut and MCT oil every day. So if you ask about cholesterol, he's like, he's a case of a person who did not have an increase, in his cholesterol related to coconut oil.
Well, imagine those like myself who are in a healthy place, knock on wood, and I would say the difference one can experience in cognitive function in other areas. Before we hit record, I was sharing that I recently went back to the integration of coconut oil supplement, and I realized that I'm sleeping better. And maybe it's subtle, maybe it's just who knows, but I feel better. So,
well, yeah, that case report, the 288, that was some of the people reported sleeping better, and I've had many people tell me that, over the years, with any form of ketogenic diet or adding the oils to their diet and MCT oil. A lot of people talk about having vivid dreams, and for some people that's pleasant, and other people, it depends on the dream, I guess. It might not be pleasant. So one of my sisters, she had that problem. If she took it too late, too close to bedtime, she would have dreams that she did not like. So then she just, kind of limited it to earlier in the day, that she was taking it. But other people would like to have dreams and remember their dreams, and so they on purpose do that. But a lot of people report sleeping better. I personally started sleeping much better after I started taking MCT oil, and the coconut oil. I started it the day my husband did, because I felt like if this is something that could help somebody with Alzheimer's, maybe it could also help prevent it. And I've got it so strongly on my mother's side of the family, even cousins a few years older than me that have passed away already from Alzheimer's disease, while they were in their early 70s. And I started using it right away for prevention. And that was one thing I noticed, was I started sleeping much better. And I had what I called mental endurance. I just could read and read and read. I used to, I always had a feeling that I wanted to take a nap in the afternoon, but being a doctor, I never could, it was just not possible. But that feeling went away. It kind of would give me a burst of energy that would carry me through the rest of the day. And then in the evening, get tired at the very appropriate time, and then just go right to sleep. And I had years and years of not being able to fall asleep, without a lot of difficulty. And that went away, so if people are just having that problem, I think it's worth trying, just taking coconut oil and maybe adding a little MCT oil if the coconut oil isn't enough.
Do you recommend with what time of day to integrate not only the coconut, the MCT, the lauric acid, and I believe you mentioned last time even fiber?
Oh yes, yeah, and that's, you had asked about things that could lower cholesterol, and that is one of them. So with the oils, I recommend to people, they are less likely to put you in the bathroom if you take them with food. So I suggest people incorporate it into their meals. And then that will also help sustain a level of mild ketosis, pretty much all the time. Your level will go up and it will slowly come down maybe by the next meal, but eventually it'll just stay fairly stable, from taking just the oils, adding those to the diet. And, in the evening, I usually kind of have my last food. I eat a big meal at lunchtime. And then sometimes I'll have like an ounce of cheese or something like that around 4 or 5 in the afternoon. And somewhere around 7:30 or 8, I'll have, my favorite thing is to have Greek yogurt, plain full fat Greek yogurt. And I put peanut butter protein in it, peanut protein, just trying to get more protein. And I put macadamia nuts, and I put unsweetened grated coconut in it, and a couple Brazil nuts, because they have selenium and some other minerals that are hard to get in other places. And it is like so delicious. I just love this snack. But I put the MCT and coconut oil in it too. So that's, so basically probably, well, and then you can put it in your coffee in the morning too. A lot of people do it. They call it bulletproof coffee sometimes. Bulletproof coffee started with putting coconut oil in coffee, and then later they kind of changed to MCT oil. But so I use really a combination of coconut and MCT oil in my coffee in the morning. I put it on salads. I put it in soup. I put it, in and on everything. But I probably average about 4 or 5 tablespoons a day of a combination of coconut and MCT oil. And I use coconut oil a lot for cooking, virgin coconut oil, very low heat, like about the temperature, that you would cook eggs in, so I have like 9, a scale of 9 on my stove. I'll dial it to maybe 3.5 or 4 at the most to cook. And if it smokes, you've ruined the oil. The smoke point is pretty low, so you don't want to try to do it on high heat. Although there is a trick that you can combine coconut oil with something like peanut oil, or another oil that has a higher smoke point, and you can cook at higher, temperatures with it if you combine it with certain other oils, so that's
Now,
one. Yeah.
the other thing I picked up based on our conversation last time is I combine ghee with
Yeah.
coconut, and with
Yeah.
that combination of high smoke
Yes.
and low smoke point.
Yeah. Yeah. And I combine it with butter a lot, like I love to make shrimp. And so I do half coconut oil, half butter, like real butter. And I put minced garlic in it, and just cook shrimp in it. And then I'll add just a little bit of seasoning, a little salt, maybe usually just a little salt. And they're so delicious that way. Um, so, and the butter probably lets you go a little bit higher on the temperature, but ghee would be even allow you to go even higher without ruining either of the oils, and then extra virgin olive oil is supposed to be not really a great cooking oil either, but for certain things, like I'll combine coconut oil and olive oil to make spinach, which you can do at pretty low temperature. And I'll put, again, minced garlic in that. And I have a seasoning. It's called Everything Bagels seasoning that I like to put in my spinach. And I put pine nuts in it. And, it's just delicious. And, so there's, you can combine coconut with other oils, when you're cooking too, oils and fats. And so back to the cholesterol issue. Yeah. Because we almost hit on that a couple times. Yeah, fiber. A lot of people really, they don't get close to enough fiber. And I found that for myself too. I started keeping a spreadsheet. I find if I'm really trying to lose weight, I have to keep track of what I'm eating. And I like to also look at grams of protein and fat and carbohydrate and fiber, keeping track of that. And I realized that I was eating maybe half the fiber. I was trying to really do super keto, where you cut out grains and, all of that too. And my fiber wasn't anywhere close, but so doing some kind of a fiber supplement could be very helpful, and it can reduce your LDL cholesterol substantially, so maybe taking 5 or 10 grams of extra fiber a day, depending on how much you're getting in your diet, could be very beneficial. And I found one that I like a lot. It's called raw organic fiber. It's just called raw organic fiber, and it's a combination of fibers from all different kinds of plants and fruits, and including like coconut meat has a lot of fiber in it. So there's some of that from acacia, from chia, from flax seeds. They just have this combination of about 12 or 13 different fruits and vegetables. That's just a fiber. It doesn't taste like anything. You put it in liquid and it puffs up. It kind of gets thick, doesn't taste bad at all. And I have some of that every day, to try to make up the difference in the fiber. And fish oil too can help bring your cholesterol level down if you're worried about that. And olive oil too. One of the ketogenic dietitians that I was talking to at the conference last week, she was telling me that she has some olive oil at each meal as well, to help control her cholesterol level. So that's another thing that people can do. Yeah. That's just natural, just part of your diet, basically.
I was curious, is there any rule like too much of MCT or too much of coconut oil per day when you're putting it into the food as itself, as opposed to taking the supplement tablets?
Mm-hmm. I don't know if there's a limit. For most people, it's a limit of what might put them in the bathroom or not. So I usually tell people, because some people are so sensitive to it. Other people, it doesn't bother them at all. Like the first time my husband took coconut oil, he took a little over 2 tablespoons, and that's a lot, for a first time. I took it too, because I thought if I'm going to give this to him, I wouldn't give him something I wouldn't give myself, So I thought we'll both do it together. And I don't have my gallbladder. I had it removed years ago, and I did have indigestion the first time. I felt like I had a big lump in my stomach. I didn't have diarrhea though, and he had no problem whatsoever, with it. But but then, so I backed off for myself, and then I just slowly increased it. Eventually I was able to tolerate it just fine. Your liver will just, even if you don't have a gallbladder, your liver still produces those bile acids, that are stored in your gallbladder. And it learns to make more of them if you're eating more fat in your diet, but that's something that has to, increase gradually, so I usually suggest that people start around like a half or 1 teaspoon 2 or 3 times a day with food, when they start it, to start very slowly. Some people even a quarter teaspoon. And I even, some people found that they were so sensitive that they would take a drop or two and then add a drop of oil every few days, and they were able to work themselves up. But I think for most people, it works to try to start with a half or 1 teaspoon 2 or 3 times a day with food. And then every few days, if you're doing fine with that, you're not having diarrhea, basically, to increase it by the same amount, maybe every 3 or 4 days, and then just try to work up. And if you're doing it for prevention, I suggest people try to get to at least 3 tablespoons a day of coconut, MCT oil, or a combination of it. If they're having a problem, I encourage them to try to get beyond that, 4 to 6 tablespoons or more if they can handle it. My husband was taking even quite a bit more than that, but it did take about 4 months to get up to that amount, just slowly, because he would, if we pushed it too hard, he would sometimes end up in the bathroom. Yeah.
I like the fact that you've made it very clear, though, that there's not too much, but one should into it, like you're saying, a half a teaspoon.
Yeah, ease into it.
And be cognizant of how your body is responding.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly how it's been with me and MCT. MCT had an effect where the gut of my my gut would sometimes hurt. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Some people do complain of like some stomach cramping or bloating sometimes, or gassiness. I hear that once in a while. Don't hear too much. I hear more about gas with fiber, taking fiber.
And again, it goes back to this whole, I call it the symphony of things that you're doing for your body. But
Right.
such a powerful thing. That's why I wanted you back. And what's interesting, it's a nice segue now that you mentioned the story, the supplements, and the fact that there's a growing understanding. The conference you were at, you said there were more dietitians there.
Yeah,
And
many.
yeah, and one of the interesting things I remember when I spoke to you previously is among the people that are in the medical field, at least from a previous generation, they were not necessarily trained on the various aspects of diet and what is the truth behind how it affects our, I would say, cognitive function and other functions of our body. And I like to think of it as that we're in a new era, because there's a more like open-mindedness to like, maybe there's truth to Ayurveda.
Yeah, right. Yes. Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think there were a lot of, what I've read and learned about it. There are many practices that could be beneficial. And when COVID first, came out, when we started having this problem, fairly early on, there was a graphic that was put out by the government of India. I don't know if it might have been one of the regional governments, but they showed putting coconut oil in the eyes, the nose, and the mouth to help fight coronavirus. In the Philippines, they did several studies where they put it into their food. They would eat coconut oil anywhere from like 1 to 3 tablespoons, like up to 3 times a day, in several different studies. And one of them happened to be in prisoners, who they're like a captive. I mean, if you can imagine, if that gets into a prison, everybody's going to get it, but a lot of people were getting it. But it shortened the amount of the recovery time by at least 4 days, because they were testing them every day for the virus. And the virus would be gone 4 days earlier, and their symptoms were improving earlier. The men that got the coconut oil in their diet versus the ones that didn't. And, and it was, they wanted to do studies in hospitals, but there were so many other treatments too, options. It would be too hard to control, whether it was coconut oil or some other treatment that they were getting, so they couldn't really end up doing it in the hospitals. But some physicians did studies in their practices to see, if basically it could keep them out of the hospital, that type of thing. And they did have some good results with those too, so, I mean, it's really an interesting oil. And I mean, I was taught in medical school, it's the artery clogging fat. And it's like, where did that come from? And it came from really a consumer group that they were obsessed with, getting saturated fat out of the diet. And there was a millionaire, he had a heart attack, multimillionaire, he had a heart attack. He was the one that pushed McDonald's, for example, to stop using beef tallow to make their French fries. And, then they ended up using like partially hydrogenated oils to do that instead, and they got rid of movie popcorn, movie butter for popcorn, for movie, whatever, you would squirt it on and a lot of that had coconut oil in it, but it was often hydrogenated coconut oil too, which wouldn't be good for you either. Any hydrogenated oil is not good. They've been banned from the US. Trans fats have been banned in the food supply in the US finally, as of 2021. Officially, the manufacturers are not allowed to add, trans fats and partially hydrogenated oils. They used to be generally recognized as safe by the FDA, and they no longer are, so those have been pretty much eliminated from our food supply, and I don't know if most people are even aware of it, but there were forces that it wasn't based on really proven science that, started calling coconut oil an artery clogging fat, but they were using it, saying that any solid fat is an artery clogging fat is how it started out. And then for some reason that's stuck to coconut oil for whatever reason. Yeah. But it was not based on actual science that it clogs your arteries. It melts 2 degrees at 76 degrees, which is more than 20 degrees below body temperature, is when coconut oil melts. If you have the oil in your house, you put it on your palm, it melts immediately. You put it in your mouth, it melts immediately. It doesn't stay in a solid form that would like clog your arteries. I mean, that's really a misconception. That's been around for a long time. Yeah.
I just making that connection that when someone says clogging your arteries, it's like a actual science that thing you're consuming does not move or flow through, and hence it stays there, hence the clogging. I never made that connection.
Yeah, but that's what they were implying, that the solid, somehow you're absorbing the solid fat, but your digestive tract completely dismantles the triglycerides that are in these oils and fats. And then, they get transported and then they get rearranged somewhere else and often into other types of fats. So they don't stay as particles. They're not absorbed like solid particles at all. They're completely taken apart, before they're in the process of digestion, before they ever get into your bloodstream.
So that's a really good segue for cooking now, because
yes.
one of my favorite aspects, again, another plug for your book. One of my favorite aspects of your book is cooking, because I've shared with you in the past, I have this deep passion for cooking. And I love to lean into my Indian heritage and often cook in recipes. So it's fun for me because with coconut oil, there's so much you can do with Indian food.
Yes. There's a big background. A lot of curries have coconut milk in them, for example.
Yes, absolutely. And there's so many things you can do. It's like coconut milk with noodles, coconut milk with any kind of protein-based entree, I would say.
Yeah.
So, having said that, I've been often relying on your recipes, and one of my favorite ones inspired something from my mom, something that my mom used to make that you mentioned. Garlicky spinach with coconut oil is
yes.
Yeah. I think of spinach is like this beautiful vegetable that has so many nutritional benefits, and then combine that with garlic, which is, I believe, maybe you can share a little more about your knowledge about garlic, but I believe it's very healthy.
Yes.
Oil. So I created something called a garlicky keto, what would I say, a broccoli curry.
Cool.
You could share a little bit about that
Yeah.
inspiration as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, tell me what you did, like how you changed it. How did you change it?
Oh, instead of spinach, it
Uh-huh.
was it is something my mom used to make.
Mhm.
Basically, very similar approach. The
Mhm.
recipe will be in the show notes, but basically taking the coconut oil, and I also combine it with ghee just to give it a little more flavor,
Mhm.
and add garlic, some spices in the bloom part.
Mhm. Mhm.
And the particular spice that I mentioned, it is called ajmo in Indian language.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
forget what the English word is, but
Mhm.
that is it's known to have a medicinal quality to help with digestion. And I
Mhm.
wonder if back in time of Ayurveda, and
Uh-huh.
when recipes would be created, they would
Mhm.
combine things conscientiously, knowing that, well, maybe sometimes digesting something like broccoli can be
Mhm.
the digestion, but if you
Mhm.
combine it with this particular spice called ajmo in the bloom, it goes down better.
Oh, how do you spell that?
AJMO is the way to announce.
AJMO. Mhm.
Yeah, and in the recipe that I'll include for you and the
Okay.
notes
Uh-huh.
has the English name, which it's escaping me at the moment. I just need more coconut oil to remember.
I say that to myself. You need a little more coconut oil today. Sometimes,
Yeah. Well, and I enjoy the fact that I could put coconut oil in this recipe.
Mhm.
And now that I know that it's okay to up it a little bit more, what I would suggest for anyone who makes this recipe is maybe drizzle a little more coconut oil at the end.
Yeah,
And
that's a good idea.
I also suggest drizzling some shredded coconut in on top just for flavor.
Yeah, that would be really good. I do shredded coconut in quite a few recipes. There were some that are done in a wok, more like an Asian style wok recipe, that I often will throw shredded or flaked coconut into. I don't know. I love it. And, I mean, stay away. I mean, the sweetened coconut, I mean, it tastes really good, but mostly you taste the sugar, but unsweetened coconut, it's available out there. It's really cheap too. I mean, you can get a whole pound of it for, a big bag of it for $3. It's not very expensive, and it can add a lot of and it adds a lot of fiber. It's mostly fiber, something like 70% fiber in shredded coconut, and so that's another great way to get some fiber too. Oh,
Yeah.
you were asking me too. I was thinking about how much, is there a top amount to eat? Well, some people, they say, well, I gain weight if I do this. So, well, if you have a tendency to gain weight and you just add the oil to your diet and don't subtract anything, you probably will gain weight. If you're thin, you might want to just add it to your diet if you're too thin, and you'll gain weight. So I suggest that people substitute it for other fats, but even better, substitute it for other carbs in their diet. Maybe cut the size of the portions of some of the starchy foods that they're eating, the rice, the bread, pasta, cereal, things like that. And cut back on that, to compensate for the calories of adding the extra oil to their diet to try to avoid gaining weight, because, well, when my husband first started doing this, I was just adding it to his diet, and he did gain a few pounds, and he's like, I don't want to, I'm gaining some weight. And we're like, oh yeah, yeah, that is, can add, especially when we were getting to that 3 and 4 month mark where he was eating a lot of the oil. And so all we did, he was already not eating as much carbs, but he started just leaving behind, and then I just stopped adding it. The breads, the pastas, the rice, we'd have a little bit of like whole grain rice or something, maybe no more cereal, like in the beginning we were putting it in oatmeal, and then he decided he didn't want oatmeal anymore. He said, I'm sick of it. Figure out a different way to do this, but it was a good thing, oatmeal can be very good, especially whole grain oatmeal, but a little bit, people in the US tend to fill up their whole plate with spaghetti, and then they put a little bit of sauce and meat on the top of it. And, so I suggest start with cutting that in half, And then when you get used to that, cut it in half again, get used to eating more, like a quarter of the portion that you used to eat. And it can greatly reduce your blood sugar. It's amazing.
I personally don't overconsume bread. I like it,
Yeah.
but it's a rarity. And the noodles that I use, I've been for this plant-based or vegetarian.
Yeah, there's some interesting noodles. There's one that's made from heart of palm.
Yes, I
Um,
use that.
yeah, and they even have like a rice that's made out of it, So if you happen to like the flavor of heart of palm, you can kind of get that texture of a pasta or rice, but it's vegetable. It's not white flour, that it's made out of.
I got my husband and my son love spaghetti, but I found a Barilla brand that's plant-based and
Oh
also
yeah.
a brand that has vegetables in it.
Mhm.
And it tastes good to me.
Yeah, yeah. I think they're very good, and like whole grain pastas too. I think to me they have more flavor. They have more texture and flavor. When I first, when we first started doing the Mediterranean diet, I had hardly ever, maybe in a restaurant, I had some whole grain rice, but I would usually eat white rice, and I, eat a big pile of it, before that. And when I started finally eating, whole grain rice, I thought this is really good, and now, I'll just have sometimes a little bit of that. And I, forget the white rice. I haven't eaten it for a long time, and I don't even buy bread. For years I haven't really bought bread. Sometimes I'll have a piece when I go to a restaurant. If it's a really special bread, I'll have some. But at home, I don't even have bread in the house. And, you know,
Barely eat bread. I do appreciate the fact that there were options with with the pastas. There's even some lentil or bean based pastas that are great.
yeah.
I wanted to maybe wrap up with any kind of tips that you have overall with how someone who is curious about integration of the coconut oil, but
Mhm.
is for any other reasons, perhaps maybe three things that you can think of to ease into the recipes that you've provided in your book.
Yeah. So, like I said, start slow. Don't like try to eat 2 or 3 tablespoons the first time because you probably will end up in the bathroom. There's just some real simple things you can add it to, like coconut oil will melt on anything warm. So early on, one of the first things I did, I mean, some people will put like butter, they'll make broccoli and they'll put butter on it, um, something like that. Well, you just start using coconut oil. One of the early things we did, like sweet potatoes. Now I would recommend if you eat those to eat a smaller portion of it, but they're considered low glycemic. It's part of a Mediterranean kind of a diet. But we found instead of, because we used to put a big glop of like butter and brown sugar and cinnamon and everything on it, and then we just started putting coconut oil on it. It actually brings the flavors out in a lot of foods, so there's some simple things like that, that you can use it on, basically, like I said, anything warm, cooking eggs in it at low heat. I usually use like 3.5 out of 9, when I make scrambled eggs. The eggs tend to absorb the oil very well. So there's just some really simple things like that you can do in the beginning. And I mean, some people have the idea they have to take it off a spoon. It's like, no, you can make this part of your diet. It's a lot more fun that way.
And I also appreciate the fact that you can proactively balance what is happening with your digestion by
Mhm.
fiber, or perhaps even having a green smoothie and integration of.
That's another great way to do it.
Well, there's been a wealth of information you've provided. I
Thank
will
you.
make sure that if you have any suggestions, like the uric acid, the fiber, anything that
Yeah.
will be in the show notes for those who are interested.
Okay.
And I have it's always such a great time talking to you. I'm hoping that there'll be another category next year where you can come back and share your wisdom. Or perhaps your new book. What's the title of the new book?
The title, it's kind of a working title right now, but I'm still debating. So it's right now it's called The Fat Truth, a deep dive into the low-fat diet guidelines that got us fatter or something like that. So it's something like that. So it's the book's almost done being written, so it'll probably be at least a year to a year and a half before it comes out. But it's been really, I've been working on this for almost a full year now. And it was originally, I was going to write a paper to submit to a journal, and then it turned into, it just kept growing and growing. And the more I learned, the more I had to learn. And it turned into 140 pages, which you can't submit to a journal as an article. And I thought, oh, this is a book again, so it's going to come out as a book. It'll have a lot of charts and graphs and things, from the famous studies that were done during the 20th century, the 7 countries study. And there was another one called the National Diet Heart Study. I had a devil of a time getting a copy of their 400-page report, but a 98-year-old scientist who was involved in the study loaned me his copy. He mailed it to me so I could read this. It was put out by the American Heart Association, but you can't buy it from them anymore. You can't buy it from them. You can't find it in a library. So wow. He loaned it to me. It was really amazing, but it was very interesting study, that'll be in the book. But this book too, the cholesterol thing, the very last chapter is about 40 pages about this whole saturated fat cholesterol issue. And it has a discussion of the cases, those studies that I had done the information on. And the middle part of the book is really the science of ketones, where this idea came from, the science behind it, the many studies that have been done now, with mostly MCT oil, a couple with coconut oil, but ketogenic diet and that type of thing. And then the last part of the book is how to incorporate it into your diet. So, and has recipes, so it's kind of got the whole everything in there about from beginning to end.
I can't wait to see the recipes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's some new ones and, some that were in the book previously. And there's one that it's not keto at all. It's called Once a Year. I call it Once a Year birthday cake, but it's a chocolate ganache birthday cake where the icing and the cake itself are made with coconut oil. And it's like the most delicious cake you will ever eat. It's so good. But it's like you wouldn't want to make this routinely as part of your diet, for your birthday, have a piece of it, maybe freeze a bunch of it. I don't know. But that's the only kind of non-keto recipe in the book. I just had to keep it. It was in the first book and it was too good not to put in there.
Well, maybe you and I can do a Zoom together and try some recipes because I love to cook and I believe that a lot of these things can integrate Thai and Indian and other nationalities.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. This could be adapted to any diet. I mean, all the basic food groups are available to every culture. I would say, nearly every culture, all of the basic food groups are available that are considered Mediterranean diet. It's not really the Mediterranean diet. This is really a global diet that, it just happened to get that name. But it's a whole food diet, basically, is what it is. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you, Dr. Mary Newport. I am so honored. And I always learn so much from you. So much.
Thank you.
Have a great day. And I hope to have you back and have you talk about your new book.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you so much, Shopa.
Thanks for tuning in, sweet soul. If you've enjoyed this episode, I would be so grateful for your kind review on Apple Podcast. Simply click on the link in the show notes to leave your lovely feedback and uplift our spirits. Your support means the world to me and helps our show thrive. So please show me your love and continue to practice Omni Mindfulness.